Hello and welcome to Rig Rundown number 5 with Phil Ebcidic. Have I said that right?
Absolutely perfect, Ben.
Oh, spot on. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks, Ben.
So formerly VCOADSR, I should say, because there's a good amount of content out there under that name.
Yeah.
I think we've discussed why the name changed before, but name change.
I think really just a new direction. It's pretty much full on techno now. It can't be described as anything but that. So, and I'd done enough with the VCOADSR alias there. I was happy to make a change. So there were lots of different things, but it's good to sort of break away and start something new.
Yeah, especially when you think you've found, as you said, just like now it's just straight techno. When you find that and just say, right, now this is it. This is the start of it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if there's a lot of music I've put out there, and it's quite varied. I think its general course has been towards what I'm doing now, but I think now it's a bit more formed. So move on.
Yeah, well, first of all, I mean, we usually end with this kind of stuff, but where would you suggest people, obviously after this live stream, go and see your stuff? Where's best to kind of guide people to?
Probably SoundCloud. So SoundCloud /Ebcidic, and also YouTube /Ebcidic. Those are the two main ones, really, Ben. And obviously, then there's also my Bandcamp, but we can pull our link into the comments.
Yeah, I'll link to all this, but
SoundCloud and YouTube. Yeah.
So we've seen. Well, I was going to say some impressive content recently, but there's always been a lot of impressive content with your work. These modular workout videos is probably a place I'd suggest people start. And obviously that leads us into this rig rundown, the idea of what you're using, how's it changed. Obviously you've been on modular podcast shows and other bits of live stream stuff. We've got to know each other over the past couple of years. This is a super streamlined version of, well, anyone's live rig really, but certainly other things I've seen you using and amount of gear that you're carting around. I'll pull an image up, and I guess the first thing really is quite heavy on the orthogonal devices units, which I know get people excited and scared probably in equal measure.
Sure.
To start with, I guess, why those units? You've two of those sequencers, the ER3 101 and the 102 expander.
Yeah. So two of them, but I'm probably going to go on at some length and say how great they are and etc.
Go for it.
But basically, a bit like Blue Wolf 7 Phil, we were both Circlon users. But as I've said before in other podcasts with you, is that there's a weight issue as well in terms of carrying all this stuff around. The Circlon's good. Well, it's good. It's exceptional, but it was just too much to be carrying around, as well as all this modular gear. And I think the ER 101 and 102, they're about the closest you can get to the sort of concepts that you get in Circlon. But the key, the things I particularly like about it is the fact that you've got 4 tracks per sequencer. You've got 2 CVs as well as a gate for each track. And then really it's all the mathematics and all the transforms that you can apply to sequences. So you a bit like a non-destructive modulation of sequences. And then, once you can add all that modulation in, but then you can always revert back to the original idea. And a lot of people will often sort of almost cringe at what you've got on the screen now. Actually, I would say you can get pretty efficient with this in about 1 hour. So,
all right, wow.
Yeah, the way it's designed in terms of the ergonomics, where those 2 encoders are and where the buttons are, you can get really, really quick. And so when you've got a quick idea, you think, all right, I'll do this and I can do that. You can then say, all right, I want to just duplicate that sequence, maybe change a note. And it's super, super fast. So once you get going on it, it's really quite a fast workflow. And the things like you've got the commit and things like that, so you can save all these things. You can then actually load a new snapshot, which is basically a saving of all 4 channels and everything, and then you can say load the next snapshot or any snapshot you desire, and you can do that all synced based on a pattern or a step or even a track. So in terms of, well, for techno, it's brilliant actually, because I don't have to worry about things going out of sync or anything like that. And I probably will say though that I have put the 101 and the 102 through its paces, and I'm sort of responsible for, of the last 10 updates, probably about at least 6 of them.
Right.
In terms of firmware.
End user testing. So, I mean, it's a 4-track sequencer for those that haven't seen it before. A CVA and a CVB, so it's 8 CV outputs and 4 gates. I don't know this that well, other than asking you this question before of, this seems really scary and really cool at the same time, tell me about it. And I've done, you mentioned Phil, Blue Wolf 7, I've done the same with Phil, and really briefly been shown a little bit in person, but I've never had one here to get to grips with.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the thing, apart from what seems obvious in terms of you got these different outputs for the CVA and the CVB and the gate, the key thing is that you've got these numbers. Like in this example, you got 15 and 21. Now, basically what that represents is that you've got an index. It's just an index table. So you have 99, well, you have actually 100 indexes, just basically a table of 0 to 99. And then each of those indexes has a voltage value. And so, for instance, in the screen grab you got there, you got CVA and it says 15. That's next to the right encoder. Well, if you go to the top, that 15 represents 1.25 volts, and that's it. It's just really simple. So when you get the sequencer, you'll get a bunch of tables, a bunch of these voltage tables already, but you can make your own. I've made plenty of my own as well, and those tables can be scales, all sorts of different types of scales, but they can be linear ramps, they can be anything you want it to be. So the reason why I always sort of bang on about this sequencer is just it's completely open to your own imagination, and it's the same in terms of there are no fixed number of steps. Well, there are if you really were to go mad, but I mean, to be honest with you, there's no way I think it's likely to use all the possible steps that the memory would allow. So you can just have steps of all different durations, different lengths. It's completely open-ended, and so you get to decide what a bar is. There is no concept of a bar or bars or notes. It's just whatever you decide it to be.
I was going to ask it anyway, but Joe Miller in the chat has just said, so is it microtonal? I imagine yes.
Yeah, you can make all of you get to completely control the voltages, and you can go in and you can edit them. So you could start off with a equal temperament scale, but then you could say, you know what, I'm then going to start really modifying it, and you can get all sorts of weird detuned stuff. So yeah, there is absolutely nothing to stop you from building all those sorts of scales if you wanted.
Yeah, especially with it being, like you said in the top right, that 1.25 volts, being accurate to 3 decimal places. I imagine it's no issue to work out.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing, I was just going to say, Ben, apart from the obvious things like pitch and maybe ramps and stuff like that. I mean, for instance, one thing I've done is I've built my own CV table for the tip top one, so that I can because the way that the tip top one works, it's not based on 1 volt per octave in terms of sample selection.
Okay.
Some other thing, which is difficult sometimes, but with this thing, it doesn't matter. You just make your own table to get to really pinpoint the samples you want. So those are quite nice things. I mean, you could actually build a table, a voltage table, in such a way that if you had really an oscillator with really bad tracking, you could actually build a table so it tracks perfectly.
Yeah, because you could put the steps in as a major or a minor scale, or just chromatic as it should be, and then go, actually, this is getting a bit flat. So I'm going to have to just push this voltage up a little bit.
Correct.
Working up the table. That leads to another nice question, I think, from Flux in the live chat. For anyone watching this back, we do this live. Subscribe to my channel and Facebook and whatever. I tend to post before we go live, and certainly on YouTube you'll see it at least a few days beforehand that something's coming. For those not in the chat, although now I believe YouTube's updated its services, and the little live chat that sits to the right of the video that people can see now live, I think will now auto scroll when you watch it on playback as well. Because it used to be that you'd lose the live chat and then it would just result in being a normal YouTube video and you could comment underneath. The live chat will now scroll. So for those that get a bit rowdy, everyone's going to see it now. But yeah, Flux in the live chat said, compared to other sequencers, how is it suited to live programming? Because you mentioned setting up all these things that, you know, if an oscillator doesn't track specifically for sample selection on something that isn't volt per octave, is it something you'd edit live, or is it a prepare beforehand and go out and influence the machine by CV or button press kind of stuff?
I mean, there's nothing to stop you from programming it live. I mean, I'm not sure what the benefits would be to trying to program it live and trying to come up with, unless you have some explicit musical idea that you knew you could program in quite quickly. I'm not sure what the value of that would be. I think what you just said when you were asking the question, Ben, was it's actually maybe setting up all of the sort of CV ins and all of the transforms that you can apply to these sequences that then you can actually play. I mean, I over the years now, you know, sort of been through improvising live and all this, but ultimately at the end of the day, I personally prefer to have some solid musical ideas which then I can play around with on the fly, as opposed to trying to come up with something there and then. That just doesn't now suit me. But I mean, you could program stuff in, and because there's this hold function, you can actually do that whilst a sequence, all 4 sequences are still going round. You can actually write something on brand new and then commit that in a synced way. So you could do, and you could modify things on the fly. That
seems like its advantage. I think I don't know Flux if I've got that wrong, but ask the question again. But for, you know, having a traditional analog sequencer with 16 physical knobs or a pressure point or something seems like a nicer way to do that. If that's what I wanted to do, if I knew I wanted to get in and kind of third step a bit higher, second step a bit lower, in a more kind of jammable way. But then still saying that, I don't know whether they mean live as in like playing around in a studio getting ideas, or actually live on a stage. I don't think I'd want to be, not careless because that's the wrong word, but I don't think I'd want to be going, okay, step 3 just a bit higher. And I don't know what that knob's going to go to in terms of the next note. I might have a musical idea where I think, I wish that octave was playing a third, or I wish I could get that onto a fifth. And actually that would be easier on this because you could pull it up off that playing layer, edit all the notes you wanted to do to the next value, and then hit commit when you're ready to go. So I guess that in live, it makes more sense because you can kind of come out of what's actually happening.
Exactly. I mean, the other thing about that scene.
Oh, that's a good pause face. You've just frozen, if you can hear me. Oh, looks like we've lost him. Right, okay. Obviously, Phil's frozen. We'll try and get it back. Let's get some stuff in the chat room going while we wait for Phil. Let me ping him a quick message on Facebook as well. And I will pull up an image.
Oh, did we lose it there, Ben?
We did. I was just trying my best to freestyle. I think it did catch me off guard. Yeah, we lost. You just said, I think the thing about that C, and then it cut.
I don't know what I said now. Yeah, I think. You basically you can actually see what you're doing. You can see it running round, but you can also use the destructive transforms to shift things up by fifths or sevenths or octaves up and down by the maths function, and that's really an easy way of doing to modify things on the fly, even live, which I can do. So yeah, there is scope for using it live for sure. I mean, I personally, as I say, I prefer to have some at least raw musical idea before I get up on stage.
Yeah. It's a safety net, isn't it? I think it's like using a random module, but through a quantizer that will only give you one of 3 notes. There's some safety there that it isn't going to clash or be dissonant or, let's be honest, just sound really bad.
Yeah,
There's not you particularly, Modular in general can, and I wouldn't want to do that in front of a.
Yeah, I mean, you got to face up to the fact that there's the majority of music that's played live is not improvised. So I mean, this notion that modular maybe ought to be improvised, I'm not entirely sure where that comes from. There's no, it's just an instrument, so you just use it like any other instrument. So anyway, you know,
I think so. That's an interesting point actually, because there's improvised forms of other music, but there's a ton that isn't. So to think modular should be is kind of an odd.
Yeah, and even with the things that are, I mean, blues, jazz. I mean, you can have improvisation, but within a defined structure, musical structure and context. So again, it's improvisation within a framework that even for things that you know do have improvisation. So like I say, I'm not sure. Whether, I mean, I'm not saying that people are saying that modular music should be improvised. I'm just saying this shouldn't be the thought that it might be.
I'm sure I've heard it before, but I think even a lot of chance-based music concrete and things like that, going back 50 plus years and since, it's still within a defined set of parameters. Bang on about random all the time. How controlled random is amazing, but just totally random, I can see why people just go, no, I don't want any random in my system. I'm not into random music. And it's like, well, like sample and hold, for example, can be glorious on loads of things, but it doesn't have to sound random in its application. One thing we should mention with the sequencer before we kind of move on to any other modules, the 102 expander, I'm sure you've said before, or a couple of other users have, that is crucial.
It is. It's in actual fact, not that I'm getting commission from Orthogonal Devices, although maybe I'll drop Brian a line. The 101 is a great little sequencer, but when you put the 102 with it, it changes the game completely. I mean, I've said before, I'll say it one more time. This sequencer with the expander is the best sequencer in Eurorack, and I really do genuinely believe that. It's so open-ended, it's so cleverly made, and then when you've got you can see there you've got 3 different parts. You've got a part, so you can build a massive sequence, and then you could use, say, pressure points to then choose the part that you'd like to then play, which is really nice. So you can build whole songs if you wanted to have a sort of song structure. And the groups, which is really what I mainly use, the groups, you've got the possibility of modifying every single CVA, well, both CVAs, the duration and the gate for every track, for every step. There are actually, I think, 16 groups which can have different types of mathematical functions. I mean, it is seriously deep, and I only use it in a pretty simple way for the group transforms. For instance, because you asked why I had 2 of them, so I think obviously it looks like it lends itself to melodic sort of sequences, let's say. But I also use it for all my drum and my percussion sequencing. And for instance, you know, using the CVA and the CVB and the gate for, say, the hi-hats, I can actually then program in the accent and the intensity for the accent. And one of the group transforms I'll use is I'll actually add a random number of 0 to 20, whatever that represents in voltages. So every single hit always has a slightly different accent, and just little stuff like that. And it can really subtly change those hi-hats every single hit, which just makes the whole thing more listenable, in my humble opinion.
Yeah, it does. But I mean, when somebody says to me, "I don't like random," that's the usual one of two examples I go to is, try and hit the drum in the exact same place with the exact same force every single time. You will drift, obviously, distance on the drum by a couple of centimeters maybe, or millimeters if you're very accurate. It's going to make a tonal change, but then obviously that force and velocity is never exactly the same. Especially on hi-hats as well, when you've just got 16th notes just piling through a beat. It's kind of nice for a while, I think, with some techno for them to be really rigid. But as well, I think that's quite fatiguing.
Yeah, it is.
Especially in more stripped back minimal styles. It's why some techno jams on Modular or other gear, I think, sound very basic. Because it is, the kick's going to be on all 4 beats. There's probably going to be an open hi-hat in between that. 16th note kind of closed hi-hat right through is fairly common. But if there's no life to any of it, it kind of doesn't work for me.
True.
It doesn't need to be massive, but obviously you can vary that amount of randomness from very
the accent is just, it's obvious. It's obvious. You do that in Ableton if you were programming a hi-hat. But just to do it in the modular, it makes all the difference to, say, the hi-hats. If it's just always hitting at the same intensity, it just gets boring very quickly. So, yeah.
So you mentioned using it for drums. So with 2 of them, you've potentially 16 CVs and 8 gates. Yeah. What's the first one doing if that's never drums? How many? Well, we'll get on to what's in the kind of voices and the drum sounds, but what's the kind of top 4 tracks doing the first one?
So first on the top row, that's kick, hi-hat, second hats, and tip top one. So I've got 2 tip tops on the left hand side there. So you've got the first 3 modules there, Ben. You've got the feedback channel.
Yeah, kind of little preamp channel strip.
Yeah. You've got the tip top one. That's my kick, and then you've got this micro fade IntelliGel crossfade. They don't make them anymore, unfortunately, or else I'd buy another one. But so and then I've got the mod next to it, the Pico mod, and that's basically my drum voice. So I've got samples which I'm parallel processing with the feedback module going into the crossfader, and I'm actually also using the envelope that comes out of the Pico mod next to the crossfader to also do CV the crossfade if I want. So I can manually crossfade it, or I can actually use an envelope and change the envelope. And so all that just allows me to bring some variation into that kick. I might not change the kick sample itself in an entire gig. It depends whether or not, in a sense, I've remembered to. But even if I don't, I've got enough there to really drastically change the sound of the kick. Plus, bearing in mind, I guess we'll get into it, but all of these voices that are in this system all go through the Model 1 mixer, and they've all got EQ and filters as well. So there's a pretty large scope for modifying the different sounds. But yeah, so anyway, we've got, that's the first voice, that's the kick.
So what are the 2 kind of CVs out? Obviously, the gate is firing off the samples.
Yeah. So the first CV out is actually modulating the pitch.
Okay.
And the second one, I'm not even sure I'm using the second one at the moment. I can't remember actually. But
nice you mentioned the envelope on the little Pico mod.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I've got 3 of those now.
Fading in, say, a more distorted version in parallel, and maybe go into that and back off, because the start of that kick drum in any kind of drum synthesis thing or sample sound design kind of stuff, it's obviously where all the impact is, the transient. And I think you can get away with a lot of distortion, certainly in my experience, really hitting that front. And the way that I've done it in past projects, building sample libraries and things, is to make just cut a very short part of that kick drum out and just distort it heavier than anything else.
Yeah.
But then I don't want that for the tail. I don't want this kind of big farty gabber happy hardcore kick drum sound has its place, but maybe it's not for me. So it's to be able to quickly fade from heavier drive and back to kind of smoother tail.
Yeah,
really cool. And I mean, in terms of space, that's what, 15 HP?
4, 8, 12, yeah, 15.
It's not that big for such a comprehensive kick. You know, if you compare it to a bigger bass drum voice, of which there are several, modular, that might be 12, 14 HP, you've probably a lot of scope more than, well, the sample thing gives you a ton of scope, but you've got the control that one of those bigger modules would offer in terms of hands-on actual synthesis and forming of your sounds.
Yeah. I mean, what I like about this, Ben, is it's like a halfway house. So I'm using the digital, obviously the samples and the digital sort of back end, because, you know, those are the sample I actually like using. But then to be able to manipulate and modify the kick in a way that it's still quite controlled. I mean, my problem with a lot of kick modules, drum modules, I mean, they're fantastic for sort of designing these kicks, but you only need to slightly nudge a knob for, you know, whatever the you know, 12 different parameters there might be, and then all of a sudden that kick, it's just lost that something. And I don't want, in a live situation, especially with the type of music I'm making, you just don't want that to occur, full stop. You don't want anything to sort of distort in a bad sense or change that kick. I mean, the whole thing's sat on that thing. So I've got enough like choices there that I can manipulate the kick, but ultimately I can always go back to the pure sample. And what I've noticed when I've been recording this stuff, because I multi-track everything, is that actually this analog processing of the sample does indeed actually bring you variation in itself from the processing.
Yeah, it's like having a real 909 against a sample. I think it was Mark Verbos talking about this, heavy 909 user. I think his current live rig is his 6U Verbos system and a 909. That, you know, for a bar or 2 bars of a drum beat, you probably couldn't tell against samples. But over the period of a song or a live set, that slight drift that the older analog stuff is going to give you is apparent. He said, it's, you know, add that up over several instruments and it is kind of obvious if it's just the exact same sample coming back. So it's interesting. I think it's really kind of hit the nail on the head, because you've got, obviously, all the samples are what you'd consider a sweet spot from wherever you've made the drum sound anyway. You can drive it a bit. It can be longer, shorter, pitched, and that's about it. But there's so much variation for the whole range of sounds. I mean, how many kicks do you have on that one? Have you got kind of a handful that you like?
I've got something like 24.
Okay.
And they're split into, they're basically 2 lots of 12. One where I've got more noise into the tail of the kick, and then I've got other ones which are essentially after the first, well, I don't know, 50 to 100 milliseconds is basically just essentially a pure sine wave.
Yeah, just a really clean.
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. It kind of seems like the perfect way to do it. I know.
I guess, you know, I mean, you've seen my different live setups over the years now, Ben. I mean, I had that Joe Mox, the mod bass 09. I mean, brilliant kick drum. But I was looking at it going, well, it's massive real estate, and I'm not even modulating, I'm not even changing any of the parameters. So I wanted to be able to play the kick as needed.
Well, I think earlier on, you know, going back a year or two, first seeing you play and first starting to talk to you and get to know each other, knobs that you would potentially knock, you would have just pulled off. Like the coarse tuning on an oscillator, you'd obviously just get it in tune and just pull the knob off.
That's right.
Yeah. There's just no way you were going to knock that thing.
Yeah.
So moving on past the kick, I guess we'll start to work along, and we'll get to the second ER 101 as well.
Mm-hmm.
You've another tip top one, the throbbing gristle version.
Yeah. So that's full of, sorry, go on.
And another Pico mod next to it.
Yeah. So that's actually been modulated by track 4 of the top ER101.
Okay.
And that's got basically a load of Foley samples. Now, what I did though is I find with the Tip Top one, and one thing to say about just very quickly, but it's the same idea. So even for the kick, the sample actually goes through the VCA of the mod Pico, the Pico mod. So again, I can actually close down the tail completely.
You can have, it's another form of amplitude control in that you might have a long sample,
exactly,
but you can still envelope that down nice and short.
Yeah,
should you wish.
Yeah. So on the throbbing gristle Tip Top one, that's being routed again through its Pico mod on the left of it, and that's really important because I want the ability to be able to have very short percussive sounds, or possibly more open in terms of length. But I found the range for the decay on the Pico mods is really quite long. So I contacted Erica Synths and I asked, is there any way I can mod it? And the short answer was yes, I could. So on the back of that, I've actually got a potentiometer that I've stuck onto the back, and I've basically bypassed, or you know,
it kind of reroutes around a resistor.
Yeah.
Off.
And so now I've made the amplitude decay of that second Pico mod a lot shorter. So even when it's fully open, it's still not really open. And that really works quite nicely. And also you've got the Lin log as well, which is quite nice as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, what kind, you say Foley, I mean, any noisy kind of broadband sound for me is great for percussion, kind of whatever that is.
Yeah.
What kind of stuff have you got in there?
Oh, you know, like pan hits and all sorts of. I've just taken them from a, I think it was Sample Magic, some industrial techno Foley stuff, you know, and I just went through and I found some sounds I liked. Actually, sort of as a consequence of having the WMD Chimera. So So these certainly the Tip Top and in this Pico mod, the one we're talking about now, that's basically replaced the WMD Chimera.
Yeah, let me find that. I saw you'd got this, and when it came out, I thought this would be perfect for you in that it's, I guess, more metallic, cymbal-like samples that you've a lot of control over. Yeah.
I tried it and then it moved on. So I you know, to be honest, again, I don't want to be searching and hunting for sweet spots. I want to know that I've got a sweet spot, and then I want to be able to play with it. And I think that's sort of, maybe thinking about it now, that's pretty much my sort of MO for a lot of this stuff. Is at the end of the day, I want to be able to perform, and I want to give a performance that people are interested in and, well, ultimately dance to. And I don't want to be spending time trying to find a sound that I don't think is going to fit. So,
yeah. I mean, with things like that, then I guess, and that in mind, do you get those modules in, grab some sounds, create some custom stuff for your own kind of library and bank, and then do it? Or is it just a case of you try the module, it is or it isn't for you, and it goes out again? Because I've certainly had sessions where I'll hear that, I think I've asked you before, send me this for a while, or I'll buy it off you and then I'll sell it, because I know that I want to pull some sounds for this. So I've got them, they're mine, they're my unique thing. Not to release, just, you know, I'd like to try that, but I know I don't want it. There are certain things that, the John Mox for me was an example, and I think Kyle, Gorilla Museum, is in the chat. Same thing with him, he kind of offered me buying or borrowing the John Mox bass drum for a while. And I'm not looking for a bass drum module, so I was curious, but I knew it wouldn't stay. Is it that for you, or is it a case of getting it with the intention of it might go in the rig?
More often than not, the latter. But in the chimeric sense, I did find some sweet spots, and I sampled it, and then I've kept those, and then I flogged it. Because I do want to be able to manipulate and perform sort of sound design and synthesis on the fly, but again, it needs to be within the context of I don't want a clanger when I'm performing, and somebody's going, "What the hell was that?" Because I'm trying to search around for a sound that fits that moment, and you've got to choose your battles, really. And so I don't need to have. Of course, there's a flip side to doing that. Is that sometimes you might find a great sound, and it's just that moment, and it works really well. But yeah, it's
too risky.
It can be, yeah. Anyway, I personally just didn't like that module, so I got.
Fair enough. I mean, that's the reason why you 24 kick drum samples and not 800 samples. I mean, regardless of what the tip top one can actually hold, it's not that much of an advantage. That kind of, I think that whole selling point, and I've made these packs before, and God, it's a pain in the ass to make this much stuff. But when someone sells stuff with it comes with 800 sounds, and you're like, it's not really a selling point anymore. There might be some amazing content in that, but as you've done, it's these work. This is kind of my sounds. It's like having two trusty guitars for your band sound. It's either this one or this one, and you know what's going to work.
I think that's an interesting point, Ben, actually, because building a set of sounds and a set of samples, and and all the other aspects of, like, say, my live rig. I think that's an important point that you make, is that you start to define your own sound by the things that you sort of keep or you don't keep, and it's if you constantly. I don't know, I'm sort of trying to think what I'm saying. You
kind of commit for a while. You just have a roaming constant sound, which might be the thing, that it's always this free, more improvised thing or whatever. But I think unless, almost thinking of it like albums, those 24 kicks and those, I don't know, 24 Foley sounds or whatever, and the other modules is you at this moment in time, and that might be that year's worth of gigs and an album or a couple of EPs or whatever you put out, and then they change, and it's like, oh, second album, it sounds slightly different, and it might be a swapping of a filter and things that is driven, or but I think you kind of do need to live with stuff a little bit. Sometimes.
I agree. I buy a lot of stuff, and then I do sell a lot of stuff. But this is more because it's just difficult to get your hands on these things to test stuff out. And somebody doing demo, of course, you're the master of the demos. But even then, it's still not the same as getting in your hands and putting it in context with all the other voices saying my live set. Does it fit? And if it doesn't fit, then I go, okay, well, there's no point wasting my time. I haven't got much time, so I need to use that wisely.
Yeah, my first experience of that kind of thing, and obviously, no judgment of my demos, we're not going to get into my process, but it's as dry as I can possibly make it. I try and portray it as clean. I mean, it might have effects and be dirty in the modular, but as clean a recording path and untouched digital processing as I can possibly do for everyone. But there is nothing like having it at home. My first thing with that as a teenager was distortion pedals. You'd go into a guitar shop and it'd be like, I want to try that pedal. They'd go, what do you play? And I'd lie through my teeth so I could play a really nice guitar. I'd be like, yeah, I have a PRS signature, whatever, at $2,000 at home. And they're like, this idiot 14-year-old doesn't have. Yeah, what amp do you play? And I was like, yeah, I'm on a Mesa Boogie dual rectifier at the minute. And they're like, you don't have a $5,000 rig, you tool. But they'd let me play on the rig. And then I'd try the pedal out, think this sounds amazing, and come home to my much more humble setup and go, this is rubbish. It just doesn't work for me. Like, there's a color on this drive on the pedal that just doesn't work for my amp and my guitar. There's nothing like having it at home. I think that's important, actually, for people getting into modular. I mentioned this a few times recently with people, that you almost need a kind of playground pool of money. If you've got £700 to get something, or 1,000 or 500, just having that is probably not enough, because when you want to swap the filter out or something's not speaking to you, I think you need this little pool of kind of playground cash for trading and buying secondhand and selling secondhand. And
yeah,
because there's a hell of a lot out there, and it's not all for everyone. I think you do need to play around a touch. Thinking of Kyle, who's me borrowing his John Box, came up earlier. He asked, do you try and limit yourself to a set amount of sounds at any one time whilst playing?
Yeah, I only have 6 voices ever.
Is that mixer restriction or creative approach or deliberate limitation?
Actually, it's the mixer. So let's say yes, I only have 6 channels or 6 voices that I can independently manipulate in terms of the mix, EQ, stuff like that. I mean, obviously, I've got that tip top. I've got some hats as well, so they'll get summed before they get to the mixer. But ultimately, yeah, I just have six parts: kick, percussion, some sort of bass, some sort of melodic thing, and then I've got 2 stereo channels from the ER301. So yeah, I keep things. I don't just keep pouring. You know, there's a lot of people who run out of idea, add another thing, and I don't do that. I'll take something away and replace it with something else. So yeah, I do limit myself, but it's a physical limitation as well. But actually, I quite like it. I quite like that.
I can't remember who it was. I remember reading it, getting into electronic music. It was a French house, kind of that disco-y, post-Daft Punk kind of thing, like Ed Banger Records, that kind of era. One of the producers on there saying, if you can't make something sound good in 8 things, the parts aren't good enough. And he didn't mean like, oh shit, well, I've used 6 mics on my drum kit, so I've only got 2 left. He meant, you know, drums, bass, a guitar, keys, or that many lines, I guess, parts, not how many submixes of your hi-hats you've got or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's important. I'm trying to put together a 12U live case at the minute, and the output mixer, I'm fortunate enough to have a couple of options for that, and I'm not quite sure what to go for, but it is going to be limiting either way, whether I go kind of WMD or Bafako or even one of the smaller ones. But yeah, how much do you use that EQ on the mixer?
Not massively. I use it mainly for the low end to give the kick even more low end clout.
Yeah, and to suit the room you're in, if it just needs a bit more or a bit less. So.
I'll sometimes maybe tweak the percussion, the hats and that. It really depends. I think often when I'm playing, there's enough to be doing to worry about. I like to get things in the ballpark. Once they're there, as long as nothing's screaming out, going, change me, there's something up, and then I'll try and concentrate on the entire performance, as opposed to, the micromanaging of EQ or stuff like that.
Sometimes I think Ben should do stand-up. Like stand up and talk to you and show you all the bottom half of me, because it's not usually on camera. Yeah, going back to the rig. So drum voices, we've obviously got the kick, we've got some Foley stuff. You mentioned some hats. I'll pull a picture back up. It's slightly nicer to look at than my face. So you've committed to the 909 hats module. Is that just that's a staple sound of techno, and that module nails it, so why would I use anything else?
Correct. I also do a bunch of processing. So you got another feedback channel strip there. So and you've got the ALM SBG. That's essentially just another crossfader, but it's obviously manual. And so I do parallel processing of the hats, because I actually think that I think the hats module sounds great, but for the style of techno I'm making now, then it's not aggressive enough. So I'm doing quite a bit of processing, excuse me, on the hats to pull out some of that sort of dirt and some of those really high frequencies, and just get it sounding as good, so it cuts through the mix as well as I can.
I think the important thing there as well is that you've got that EQ on that. The feedback module, by the way, for people watching, is that black. It says pre-CR on top. You've input gain like you would on a mixer, a level at the bottom and a high and a low EQ. Then it'll add that drive, but then strip out all the low end.
Yeah.
Because inevitably, a ton of drive is going to add frequencies you're not going to want as well. It's funny how with the hi-hat thing, how driven and upfront that hi-hat is almost what sub-style of techno or tech house or house it is. I remember playing with someone that wasn't as into electronic music at a live, just acoustic instruments gig, and telling him about, he said, you know, how ridiculous is it for all these subgenres now of jacking house, jacking tech, all this massive subgenre thing that we like to do as humans and pinhole everyone into a little category. And he was like, what's the difference? Like 2 BPM between each one. And I was like, yeah, if it's at 127, it's this. If it's at 131, it's this. Pretty much. And it's the hi-hat thing. It happened, being quite into dance music, I say it happened a few years ago, I think, how driven that kind of offbeat hat was. Kind of, it was like, are you playing with these guys on this bill at a festival, or are you playing in that kind of...
Right.
And it's an interesting point. But again, it's that same thing with a kick, I imagine, that you've the option to just gritty them up.
Yeah, exactly.
Enough shape from, you know, the kind of stock 909 sound. Is that the 2 HP hat next to it?
Yeah, that's a new acquisition. And actually, yeah, so just you see the shapes next to the feedback.
Yes.
So the throbbing gristle 1 and the hats, the 2 HP hats are both being processed on an individual channel of shapes.
Okay.
So yeah, just explaining the whole
shapes
thing.
is
It's a wave shaper, stereo wave shaper, but each channel is completely independent.
Yeah, but I mean, it's in terms of wave shaping, if I remember right, there's some folding, there's some distortion, there's some almost like WMD Geiger counter wavetable type.
There's a hell of unfortunately there isn't any, there's barely any information on the website about what are the different wave shaping algorithms there are, and what they're doing. So you have to sort of just scan through and pick one, because I think it's also got 2 different modes. It's got a lookup mode and an algorithm mode. I think that's right. Okay. But yeah, anyway, so I got the going back to the 2 HP hats. So I've really only recently got that, and that's really to layer hats. So I'm still going to use the 909 hats as the main driving hats, but I also wanted a secondary hats to have a bass in places where I want to pull out, say, I want to remove the number of hits of the 909, but I still want to give the music some drive and sort of vitality in that top end by those 2 HP hats. It's actually quite a nice little module. I was quite surprised, to be fair. It's got some weird sort of, depending on where there's a sweet spot for it to sound really just like hats. Otherwise, it goes into this sort of almost like ring mod oscillator type thing, which is not what I want it for. But for just layering and having another sort of high end driving part, it's working quite well so far. Yeah,
it's almost like a ghost note thing, asking a drummer to play the same rhythm but lose the intensity, so you keep the offbeat and the 2 and the 4 in the same play, of a similar velocity, but you drop all the in between. Not using the open hat on there, if it looks right.
Just I think I'm modulating the. You have to pull it.
Yeah, I'll pull it back. I guess that's the next question. Does the decay knob modulate the time of the closed hat as well?
Yes, it does.
That came up and disappeared again. That was weird.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm modulating from the top ER101, the decay, and I think also the pitch. No, that's not right. Maybe I'm telling a lie. I don't know. Why don't I just turn around and have a look? Actually, no. I'm only using. So far, yeah, I'm only modulating the decay, which is fine. Goes back to what we were saying about adding random. So just adding a little bit of random to that decay, just very small amounts will just give it a little bit of variation.
Yeah. So for drum voices, there's still a Bassimilus Iteratas alter?
Yep.
Is that the kind of final bit of the drums? Or?
Yeah, that doubles up as a bass, basically for bass lines, like really low frequency rolling bass lines as a sort of a counterpoint to the kick.
Yeah.
So you can see there, like the attack. There's no attack, and that's I was modulating. Actually, what am I modulating on that? Yeah, I'm modulating the pitch and I'm modulating the decay, but I'm not modulating anything else. If I do anything, it's just all hand, manual CV control. And then so a lot of my set, it will be used as just this basically sine wave bass. And then I'll towards the end of a set, I'll normally then switch it into the liquid mode, and then I'll have like two proper kicks playing against each other. So
you finding somewhere to sidechain those to keep things tidy, or is it just managing to layer with the samples quite nicely?
Yeah, I haven't been. There's one thing I tried to do earlier in this version of the live rig, but no, it's difficult to actually sidechain. I haven't got enough space, so. What I do is again, you can see that I've pulled off one of the knobs in the top left of the Bassimilus there. So I tuned it and then I don't touch it. So normally, and I know what a lot of the pitches of my kicks are. So when I'm putting together a live set, I'll just play around and I'll make sure that the Bassimilus isn't sort of damaging or fighting the kick, the low end of the kick. So I do it by ear, and also I've got one of these sub packs.
The wearable backpack thing.
Yeah, I don't use it that often, but when I'm preparing for a gig, I definitely use it because there's no way I can get any monitoring of those really low frequencies at home. So yeah, I have to just do it by feel. Yeah.
Just to break off from running through the case, which obviously the kind of main focus here. ATK asked, you recently bought a Korg ESX1 again. We mentioned this on another show a while back. Are you using that with a modular rig in any way? MIDI syncing, processing through modular, or?
No, I got it as a nostalgia thing. That's not to say I won't use it in the future, but it was an offer that was too good to refuse. I managed to get it for 250 quid, and they're quite difficult to get hold of. And it was in Brighton, so it was great. But no, I'm not at the moment. I've not been using it. The funny thing I will say though about that is that when I did get it home, just to make sure it did work properly, I mean, I gave it a quick go at the guy's house, but more out of it in an hour playing around with it than I did in the first 4 years of ever owning it. Which just goes to show that when you've got a bit more of an idea of what you're doing, then even a limited piece of kit like that can offer quite a lot of possibilities. Which it was nice to think that after the number of years I've been doing this, that I've actually learned something.
Gorilla Museum in the chat mentioned, I was going to bring it up, I pulled the tab up as well. The 2 HP hats, he thinks are based on the 6 oscillator core with various filtering on a single knob. That's how the 808 hi-hats was made. It was 6 fixed frequency square waves, all XOR, like Logic XOR, which is like a digital.
Oh, okay.
Ring modding each other, and that's how they generated that cymbal tone. But obviously that's a style of electronic symbol. The 606 is slightly different to the 808. The 909 is actually a 6-bit sample. I think Matthew Shaw told me that. Yeah,
it is a sample for sure.
I think it's 6-bit as well, which is kind of weird. Everyone goes, no, it's 8, but I think it was 6, which is kind of strange. But yeah, I think that and noise, because I prefer the kind of noisier edge of hi-hats and shaping them as opposed to the square wave ring moddy kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't want my hi-hats to have tonality if I can help it. Or really obvious tones.
Like a fixed frequency just cutting through your high high end. Yeah. So you recently in terms of last time we spoke about this kind of thing on a live chat, moved to, is this back to or first, the Hertz Donut?
Oh yeah. So I was using that, Ben, when I think the first time I met you at Ross's Bells and Whistles.
Yeah, a couple of years back. Was that 3 years back or something?
I think it would be nearly 3 years ago. Yeah. So I've always liked it, and I've never got rid of it. I've got the piston Honda as well, which I've not got rid of. I was using in its place until recently the Laquelic Iteratas Placido.
Yeah, the bigger one.
But I don't know. I think it comes back to this idea that when you're in your studio, it's these, and I love the noise engineering stuff, so I'm not criticizing it whatsoever, but it's in a studio setting, you can really find some brilliant, interesting sounds out of the Placido. But I was finding live that I was having to really change the second oscillator quite a lot to try and get some places where it was really biting in a really sort of gnarly melodic sort of sounds that I was trying to get. And again, it just comes to this, I don't want to be able to think too hard about creating the sounds I want. I want to know that they're within easy grasp, you know, in terms of a couple of knob turns. So anyway, I thought, you know what, let's get the old Hertz Donut back. And it's absolutely vicious as well. It's just so, I mean, you know, I was thinking about this the other day. There are a lot of really good oscillators out. I mean, how many oscillators can there be in the world?
I'm sure we're going to see some more at Super Booth next month.
That's probably true. Yeah. But this thing is absolutely amazing. So what you can do is you can actually modulate 4 different parameters. You got the frequency of the primary, the wave shaping, the tracking, and the amplitude as well. And then you can have those all. So I'm actually modulating that modulation bus, and I'm also just modulating I'm trying to think what I'm doing now. The pitch of the second oscillator, the one that's sort of halfway down to the right. But what's nice is that you've got for each oscillator you've got 2 different outputs, which you can then, on one of them, you can actually select. So I mean, you can have some really, really nice sine wave folded sounds, but then you can go into like the saw, and and then especially when you then start doing FM on the primary with the secondary, it can turn into utter noise. So it's brilliant module. And
in terms of like tuning, I mean, it's not analog, we should say, so this maybe isn't of any issue. Is the FM stable, like as you'd expect for digital?
Yeah, funny enough, when I put it in my rig recently, the tracking was dreadful. So I had to go and play around with the tracking. I got it just somewhere I was happy enough with it. And the good thing is that now that primary tuning knob is completely anti-clockwise. So again, that just means that I'm never going to knock it or anything like that. No, it's okay. I mean, overall,
FM, you know, the depth of modulation goes up and the pitch starts rising.
Yeah, it's actually okay, I think, Ben. To be honest with you, I'm modulating it so hard and that. To be honest, if I'm going that way, I don't really care whether or not the tonality goes out the window. Or the pitch track, you know, the pitch and the tracks. It's like, okay, I quite like the idea. I quite like the fact that you can go from something which does have a melodic relationship between the pitches, and then as soon as you start to open up that modulation bus, it just starts to go elsewhere. That's sort of the reason why I put it in. Yeah,
and that's the only thing playing that part, then, I take it.
Yeah.
That's been my issue in the past. You know, if you're going to layer a sound and one of them decides its pitch wants to start going up, that's a big no-no. At least for the majority of what I was doing with that. An analog FM is terrible for it. as fun as analog FM is, but so is this the only thing, whatever line that's playing or melody or sequence or riff, it's on its own. It's you're not having to layer anything. You're not trying to put another sound on top or a bass underneath.
No. I mean, obviously, I love the bassimilus rolling away, but that is so low frequency and it has no harmonic content that it's not really. It's so separated in frequency anyway. It doesn't really matter. I mean, I will be playing other stuff in the 301, which may or may not have some tonality that I might have to, harmonic relationship I have to sort of consider. But I wanted something where I could just get something really, really dirty and aggressive without a lot of thought.
Yeah.
So I brought it back into my case, which is nice. Nice to have something that maybe I'd forgotten, and I realised, okay, there's still some life in this thing.
Yeah. So again, with the third Pico mod next to it, and the trusty favourite that I think's been there for a long time, the A124 Wasp.
Oh yeah.
Filter. Back end for the Hertz donut.
So the Hertz donut going into the Wasp. You've got the Pico mod. That's just being used as an envelope. I'm not using it for the VCA. Well, I could actually use the VCA there. It's going into another VCA anyway, the audio. And I've got the Wasp filter, which I can't seem to get a better filter. I just love it. So I've tried many different filters, and I like that one a lot. Yeah, it's great.
Pamela's workout in the top corner, I guess, just a ton of clocked modulation, and is that master clock by the look of it?
Yeah, the master. I mean, the syncing of the ER101 to Pamela's new workout is super tight. It's on an oscilloscope. If I put sort of the time range to be like 10 milliseconds, when I'm doing the tests of like a 16th note from Pamela's workout and a 16th note from the ER101, they look almost simultaneous. I know clearly they're not, but we're talking really tight syncing, and that's critical for what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So I've had a lot of sequences, and a lot of them don't slave to other clock sources that well, but this pair is perfect. It's part of the reason why, although I've seen other sequences like the Eloquencer and stuff like that, and they look pretty good, but they just don't quite have that flexibility that I want in trying to just tease out all of the subtle things that we've already talked about in terms of things like for the drums, for adding random. I mean, I'm sure you can, but just having that ability of having 2 CV outs per track plus the gate is a massive thing for me.
And it's also that thing of coming back to you and your sound. Once you've learned, I mean, I know you said within an hour you can be up and running, which I'm sure some people still don't believe with the orthogonal stuff, because it is a kind of, oh wow, that looks different kind of thing. But why would you learn something else? Must be part of it. Part of my mind would be, I can do everything I want. I can see why you bought a second one rather than, I'll look at getting something else. Not to say there aren't other good options, but
no, yeah, sure. I mean, you're right. I mean, and the funny thing is, the more I use it, the more I realise I'm barely touching scratching the surface. So I mean, I'm now actually modulating. Because basically these transforms for the ER102, I'm essentially using, you can do all sorts of things like modulate. If you have one sine wave, you could have one sine wave, which is then increasing the velocity of the filter envelope.
Yeah.
And you can actually use the same sine wave and just invert the polarity and put it onto another track. And so you can actually get 2 tracks running simultaneously, maybe with only let's say 3 notes each. And when one note is emphasized by the peak of the sine wave, the opposite is true of the other track. So you can get all sorts of interesting slowly evolving changes out of very little.
Is that related? I mean, some people go at it with analog logic and things like that, of that related knock-on effect of one simple change will seed across the patch.
Yeah.
And it seems to allow that. Sound Unit, I was just going to say, I've just lost it in the chat. I'm watching it kind of just scroll by. Asked what's the one new stuff in the middle. So there looks to be a lot of kind of custom unit stuff in there.
Yeah.
Let me pull an image back up and just try to find which is the nicest image for that. We'll go with the modular grid. Phil was kind enough to send me plenty of links. Eye candy for the show. Let's go left. I guess let's go left to right with the one new stuff. So, yeah, I don't know what that thing is on the left.
It's a custom module I made. It's not particularly sophisticated, but it's a good use of space. So what I've got there is I've got a stereo jack, and then I've built some custom cables.
Yeah.
So the tip, basically, the tip is the input from a modulation source. It then goes to a switch, and then the other end of the switch goes to the sleeve of the jack, and that goes to the modulation destination. And then these are just switches, so I can switch, and it's got an LED as well that I can just see what's happening. So when it's engaged, I can see what the signal is. Yeah, the signal is. So I've got
an insert jack on a mixer.
Yeah, exactly, Ben. That's exactly that. So it means, and then in 6 HP, I can get 2 of these switches.
Yeah.
So that works quite nicely. So I think those two, one's controlling the open hi-hat of the 909, and the other one I think is my master reset for all the different sequences. So, which is really important to have. Yeah.
Pulp Logic slew. What is it?
That's slew in the
one stuff.
Yeah, that's the Hertz donut. That's just a bit of portmanteau. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Mix B, is that the there's a mix A and a mix B, and the one that's kind of linear for CV and one that's XO for. I mean, it really doesn't matter which one you plug into which. The sliders will just feel slightly different. That's
right. Yeah. I think I could only get the mix B at the time I ordered this stuff. So, but that is actually what I'm doing. There is for the 909 hats, the 2 HP hats, and the Throbbing Gristle Tip Top 1. I'm tapping off a copy of each of those, and then I'm sending that down into my send return skiff, which is right at the bottom of this. We can get into that later, but
yeah, I've been doing a similar thing around my Tip Top ZDSP with the 2 HP mix.
Right.
Taking a stackable, splitting my signal. If I have a mix that doesn't have a send in the rack, and then having a submix that purely just feeds 100% wet delay, or Atverts is an attenuverter.
Yeah, so there's 3 of those. They're 3 offsets to control the 301 below.
FSR, force sensing resistor.
Yeah. So that's I'm using that to trigger additional hits of the Throbbing Gristle one.
Live playing in a rhythm, or
basically I've set up transforms in the 102 in such a way that when it's got a gate, it will always play quantized to like a 16th, or 16th,
like a fill button on a drum machine almost, where it'll just beat repeat. Well, it isn't beat repeat over the audio, but you get 16th note just triggers firing.
You're right, Ben. Exactly right.
Like a fill button. Another switch.
That's controlling the decay and the trigger to the 2 HP hats. Again, I just want to be able to switch, bring in hats on and off. I don't want to have to use volume controls if I can help it. Sometimes that's not appropriate.
Yeah, it's not instant. It's a very different
feel to it.
In it to fade things in and out is really different to chopping parts in and out. What's the thing next to the next boss sensor resistor? And
so that's 4 switches that output 5 volts, and those are then being sent to the different transforms of the 2 different ER102s. So basically that allows me to engage transforms. So I mean, more often than not, you know, where if you to read like the manual of the those sequences, you know, they talk about having gates, and you know, you'd have rhythmical aspects to the transforms, which indeed is true. But I just use these switches as a fixed on-off, engage the transform, disengage the transform.
Another dual switch mixer.
I can't remember what they are now. More CV to the 101s, I
think. Times 24 and run, is that some kind of sync thing?
The mix B there. You missed one, Ben.
Sorry.
That's basically mixing the 3 different outputs of the Hertz donor.
Okay.
The times that little thing there is actually a butchered Busy Circuits Pamela's new workout expander. The PEXP2, the second one, the 2 HP one. So I didn't want to waste 2 HP in the main 3U stuff. So I basically cut it up and pissed about with it until I could get it into a tile.
Cool. Then the final, going back to that mixer, for the Hertz donut. With that, I mean, I've got one of those little mixers, but my cabling's not quite as intense as your live case for the most part. Here at home, how much do you find yourself adjusting that? Is it easy enough to do, or is it a little bit fiddly?
No, it's fine. It's fine. I don't have any problem at all.
Final attenuating offset.
So that is taking the envelope of the Pico mod above it, and I can manually change the amplitude of the envelope, as well as the fact that I'm also using a VCA to change the amplitude. But I'm also, because it's like a dual pot. It means that the skinnier one on top is like basically attenuating the input, and then the larger one at the bottom is just an offset. So in actual fact, what it allows me to do is that if I want, I can just pass the audio from the Hertz donut straight to the wasp filter, and if I open up the filter of the open up the frequency of the filter, I can just have a completely open tone. Which sometimes I might want to do.
It's already been answered. Kyle again in the chat asked what was next to the wasp, and Midiverse said is it Slob Vlob?
Yeah, that's right. 2 VCAs.
Vlob, little VCA. What are they used for?
So the top one is for the audio that comes out of the wasp filter. And the bottom one, I believe, is modulating the amplitude of the envelope that opens the wasp filter, which is being controlled by the ER101. Which is important in my opinion, because you get just small changes in that envelope can bring bring to life a pretty tedious sounding sequence.
God, I'm bad with names at the best of times. Igosard, let's go with that. Said he will donate a kidney if I can get James Holden on for a rig rundown. If someone wants that to happen, I've said this with videos before. If someone says, when are you going to do a video for this? If you want something to happen, if you all go tweet at James Holden right now at the same time and tag me in it, then he might notice. I haven't ever spoken to him. But start asking people. People are generally quite receptive. Do it. I'll tweet at James Holden and see what he has to say. He might think, who's this dickhead that's telling him to do this, but you're welcome to try at my expense. Looking at the just kind of I guess finish off this main rig, someone asked what case this was as well. It's a Ross Lamond job, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah. It's it's one of his DIY plyboard jobbies.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, it is, isn't it? You move from the walnut thing because it was back breaking, I imagine.
The irony is this new one's heavier.
All right. Well.
Anyway, move on.
Yeah, looking at the bottom of that case, I'm flicking around this like a nutter. There we go. That's the image I wanted. We've got the ER301.
Yep.
Again, 2 of those. There's another one down in the effects rack. What's this first one doing up in the top?
That's 2 stereo voices. Although, as it turns out, I might have multiple things on each stereo channel being played at the same time. And this module's fantastic. I mean, I don't know. Maybe people have seen it, maybe they haven't. I don't know. But it's highly modular, which is what really I like about it. So if you're familiar and you're comfortable with making complex patches with VCAs and all sorts of good stuff like that, then this thing just allows you to do it in a software version, but still use all of the different control voltages inside your modular. So it really is a fantastic module, which I dare say will, in years to come, become a classic, because it is phenomenal what it can do.
It's still not actually released officially, is it? It's still beta firmware.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
and a direct sale, if I remember.
That's right. Yeah. But it's brilliant.
Developing at an alarming rate, like really a couple of owners I know that have it that I speak to, and then they'll say, all right, it can do this now. Almost, yeah. I haven't got one yet. And at the first, I have to admit, I wasn't too interested, to be blunt. As some people watching live maybe, they may think sound computer. No, that's not really for me. Screens, menu diving. But then as things have developed, it's kind of at some point I'm just going to have to get one of these, because it's going to do what a lot of other space is doing and more. Yeah. And save it. And
I think the thing for me is its ability to allow you to build unique patches inside it. So a lot of the textures and things that I'm using that are in my live set at the moment, they come from this. They're being modulated externally, and to just get that stereo aspect into a live set, I think is important, because I think modular Eurorack is predominantly mono. So that's important to get that. You'll see I've got 2 of those in the one below. I'm actually using it as a send return hub, and it's allowing me to do some simple things like a clock delay, which it does extremely well with no fuss. I can't say that's the same for any other clock delay I've ever used. There's always something with it, whatever that might be. This thing just works. But even doing things like adding EQ, adding in limiters, all these sorts of things where you're pre-processing the audio that goes to, say, the clock delay and all these types of things, and then rerouting internally. There's lots of routing opportunities inside this 301. It's just brilliant. But the way I see it is, indeed, it is got a screen and all that, and may not be why people might have got into modular, and me included, and myself included, sorry. I don't put it into the same class as looking at Ableton on a Mac. It's all right, indeed, a small screen, but that doesn't really hinder me in building patches that are actually interesting. And recently I reverse engineered a chord organ in the 301, and then once I've done that, I basically built that sort of simple building blocks. I then built in a whole host of other interesting things on top of it, which made it into a completely brand new instrument. So I think this 301 is a means of really enabling ideas which would otherwise maybe cost a significant amount of money in physical modules themselves.
Yeah, that's an interesting point about the delay, that if you want a clock delay effects module thing, but you want to put a filter before it, or a VCA before it, or a filter in the feedback path, you can make it just be that and be that alone. And otherwise it would be the clock delay effect and a filter before and a filter afterwards. And size-wise and price-wise, you're probably going to get to be a similar thing. It's interesting, that side of it. DB Paulam, I'm going to say everyone's names wrong. Let's just forget that I'm ever going to get it anywhere near right. Said, we're saving space at the expense of our racks, being a ground-up sound building process, and there's the kind of argument of the day. It is, effectively. I mean, do you have an all-analog Doepfer system that is literally, this module just does this, I then have to have a separate module to do this to the signal I want to put in, or do I want level ins and outs on everything? It's a totally different approach, but certainly for live, I mean, you'd have to have you'd have to take that. If you didn't have the digital, these things that are going to speed up part of the process.
I mean, the thing is, there are no rules about how anyone who buys this stuff should use it. So I'm open, I'm free for anyone to use or want to use, or have a philosophy about how they use their instrument. I'm not a Nazi, I'm not a fascist. Everyone's open to do what I want to do. It's just how I want to make the best music live. I think that's critical. And these units have really allowed me to do that. Without them, I don't think I'd have quite the same level of interest, textures, space, all those sorts of things.
Yeah, I should say, and I've told you this before several times, that your set live is the closest thing to a produced track I think I've heard out of anyone on a modular. I mean, style-wise, you can argue and whatever, but actually having heard you, especially at that coming and playing at the Leeds event that I hold on that system in that room, if someone would have just come into the room, it was dark, it was it was an afternoon modular meet, let's not pretend it was a big techno gig, but had you just walked into a darkened room with people dancing and you just thought, oh, there's just someone on a pair of decks, it just, it sounds like a produced final thing. And I don't think you'd get there just going analog building block. I think you're right in that this is enabling it to be that level of, and be recallable and repeatable, and you can go out and play a good gig.
Yeah, I think that's important. I mean, I played some shockers, and you learn from that, and you don't typically you don't want to go and repeat yourself doing something that you don't think is very good. Although I will say that I've got high standards for myself, and they're always increasing in standard. It never seems to get to a point where I go, all right, I'm happy with this now. But when you've had a bad gig, you don't want to repeat that. And also there's another aspect, which is actually if we move away from the sphere of modular, and this is, we've talked predominantly about technology and not so much about the music, is that as these instruments become more widespread and become more familiar with, say, the general music population, music listening population, the question they will ask is implicitly, maybe even not thinking about it, is do I like the sound of this or not? And I think that's basically, and if you push that argument, which I've just put forward, then we'll just all start using Ableton again. So, but the thing there is that I say, well, I'm compromising maybe notion of going, well, you know, I want this to be a hardware thing because I want tactile, you know, the control, and indeed I do. But sometimes you have to sort of say, well, but there are things that a computer does very well, and this 301 is just a very modular user interface of a computer. So, and you know, it's each to their own. But I would never stop using them now. I mean, they're just completely integral to what I'm doing.
Yeah. It's that there's quite a few people in the chat. I won't say anyone's names badly to quote them, but talking about that being able to vary a sound. The main issue for them, and I guess their judgment of others or just themselves or whatever, is that to not just play the same sounds and voices for 30 minutes in a live set, which might, you know, at events that we go to or hold or whatever, we all love kind of lusting over the gear, and we're probably quite happy and receptive to maybe not a lot of change that a general audience would want more from. But yeah, to actually perform a set in a different environment, I think that's it. Where would you get the variation from? It's the question I get asked most, I think. I like my sequences I'm making, but I feel like I'm just working on one loop. What do I do next?
Buy an ER 101.
Well, yeah, there you go. It's not usually my answer. I don't have the orthogonal stuff, so it's not my go-to answer. But
you know enough people, don't you, though,
Ben? We're working down. I mean, in terms of this rig rundown, we are down at
the last third now, are we?
Yeah, we're down to last orders almost. So modular grid updating so you could flip panels must have been useful for those.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you, I didn't even realize it was an option until last week.
Yeah, you can now flip the panels on modular grid. That guy, Clute at Modular Grid, everyone should go pay for that unicorn account just to keep that website running.
Yeah, I agree.
€20 a year, which opens you up to saving more racks and bigger racks and whatever. And I think if you need a rack that size, I think the limit currently without paying for that unicorn account is is it Dope for Monster case?
All right.
And it's like if you've got, in terms of the size, the amount of
if you've actually got all the modules that could fill something like that, I think you can afford $20 is what your point is, Ben.
Yeah. But whether you use that or not, people should go chuck that guy some cash.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, it's very worthwhile. But yeah, for those last modules, then this is the effects.
Yeah, I'd contend that actually this is probably as important as any of the other stuff, because the reverb and the delay and how I'm modifying the signals in this is really what is a massive part of the sound I've got at the moment. So obviously I'm using the ZDSP with the Halls of Valhalla, and that just works. So
yeah, great reverb.
No point banging on about that. Got a couple of WMD compressors for sidechaining both the reverb and the clock delay.
Yeah,
and then obviously we got the second 301, and that is that the first stereo pair is audio pre-processing before it goes into the ZDSP.
Okay.
So what I do there is because I can tap the outputs of one channel into another, I'm actually tapping the clock delay into the reverb path.
Right, okay.
Because my mixer doesn't allow me to reroute the return of the second auxiliary into the first. So I've just used the 301 to do that instead.
What that's also going to do, I imagine, is when the Halls of Valhalla reverb card is great, but there's no pre-delay on it. So if you wanted to roll off some low end before you hit your effects,
which is what I'm doing.
Yeah, or just say, actually, I want to put a single, zero feedback delay in there to mimic pre-delay.
Yeah, you could
do all that in that 301.
I've actually got pitch delay in there as well that I can crossfade between. So, which again, in some of my more recent tracks, I mean, one of the modular workouts that you mentioned right at the beginning, one of them, I think it's it's number 8.
Yeah.
There's a part in the track where I drop to right. It's really like banging. I know it sounds terrible, but this like low end, and basically I'm using pitch delay, pitch shifting of the reverb to create this almost otherworldly, deeper, darker sort of space. So yeah, all these sorts of things, and recently I've been building Waveshapers inside the 301, and these are all things that I'm going to start building into the send and return chain as well.
Yeah, I think people forget with pitch delays you can pitch down. You know, we kind of, as I don't know why it took a while, but the kind of pitch up shimmer reverb and stuff, the cascading octave up thing came back, it seemed, a few years ago, having been part of all the Eventide rack units and things like that. But actually going down an octave or a fifth,
it's loads more interesting in my opinion.
Yeah, me too. I like octave up, but I tend to like just a single shift. I don't want the cascading shimmer necessarily. I think that tires for me.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Ecophon was guilty of that, and it got, well, anyway, you had to sell it for exactly that reason. Ben, you know, it's just too it's right. What is it? It's just too obvious in a track.
Kind of one track on your 15-track album is fine, no more.
Yeah. And then I've got a load of it. Offsets from IntelliGel to control all these different parameters inside the 301.
The ADAC manual gates looks like a recent addition.
I've had it for a while. It's only just gone into the rig. I'm basically going to build some freeze, looping free, some loopers where I can freeze the audio going into the reverb.
Okay.
But I haven't built those yet. But I mean, all that stuff's fairly trivial inside the 301.
Yeah. So all this is moving across to mixer. What are the tracks then? I imagine you're separating out your kick.
Yeah, the kick, and then I've got the Sund hats and throbbing gristle 1.
Yeah.
Then I've got the Basimilus on a separate track, and I've got the Hertz Donut on another track, and then I've got the 2 stereo 301s in the top rig into the last 2 tracks.
Okay.
And that's it.
Yeah.
And that's more than enough to be doing in a live set.
Oh, yeah. One thing, it came to mind as you walked me back through the drums, there's no snare or clap in terms of an obvious.
Yeah. I've
stylistically, you almost don't need it for some types of techno. It's almost, there's this psychoacoustic effect of the pitch of a sound being part of how we perceive tempo. I was on about this at college where I work earlier with some students that take dubstep at 140 beats a minute. That low pitched snare drum, and it's the same for any style. I don't know why I said dubstep, but a lower pitched kind of drum sound does bog down the beat.
Yeah, it slows it.
Physically lower. So
it's like an anchor.
Yeah. So I mean, you've got the kick driving.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what you're doing there? That to actually have this slower anchor hitting?
Yeah, I mean, I can get that from the Throbbing Gristle tip top one.
Okay.
For one, but I've still got the 2 HP snare, and I've got the 909 snare by Tip Top, but I just feel that all they ever do is just sit in the obvious place, and invariably it doesn't really bring much. If anything, it just slows the feel of a track down, and I quite like driving techno. I mean, I was at a gig this weekend, and I saw Ansem play this modular set. I think he was using the the MPC Live as a sequencer to sequence all this Eurorack stuff. I mean, it was fantastic. I mean, if anyone can get to see him, then they should go out of the way. It really was a masterclass. But why have I mentioned that? There was a reason to go. Oh yeah,
about having a snare or a
I don't remember. I don't perceive at all like a snare in his stuff. What was clear was the kick was king, and it is like the loudest, dirtiest pounding kick that you could have for an hour. It was really interesting how that was really driving, and then the person who played after, I remember what I was going to say now. They were playing at like 140 BPM, which is pretty fast.
Yeah,
driving techno. I mean, it was full on. So yeah, I think you're right. I mean, if you put in that snare or that clap, it can sometimes bog things down, and it's sort of just every half a bar you've been slowed down all the time, which it's fine if that's what you want to do. But when I saw the crowd, including myself, go mental, for want of a better term, with the lack of that and the ferocity of this percussion, it's fairly difficult not to get enthusiastic about that.
Yeah. It's an interesting point for anyone in the chat. Actually, I mean, any of these questions, feel free to fire away in the chat about this. There's all sorts kind of going on. But Fetaflux says, do you have any tips for avoiding ear fatigue while doing a live set?
Ear fatigue? You mean my ear fatigue or everyone else's?
It kind of goes. You should definitely be protecting your. I'm not.
Oh yeah.
But definitely protecting your hearing, whatever you're doing, whatever style. I've so many friends that have been in the same band for years, and they know exactly what the issue is. That I stood here with my bass guitar, and the drummer's crash cymbal's been here for 5 years, and it's just tinnitus. Or
I have that in my right ear because of that very reason. I stood in a certain position in a band, and at the age of 14, 15, now I've got tinnitus in his ear, and I don't know why exactly. No, I do use ear protection. I mean, the problem with the main thing about playing gigs is that if you have got good monitors, it makes the whole thing far more enjoyable than you're trying to guess what it is you're doing. I played plenty of gigs where you don't have monitors, or the monitors are shit, and basically you just then that's where practice comes into play, because then you know the set, you know the sounds, you know what the sort of the ranges of the different voices. So if you practice enough, you can sort of get away with quite a lot of not hearing what you're doing. I mean, when I say not hearing what you're doing, I don't mean it's mute.
Just
the balance. So it is important, but definitely that helps.
A couple of quicker answer, not necessarily quick fire, but I'll fire them at you. Lestine Thomas, what sort of BPM are you going with?
Oh, it's secret. No, I go with 132.
Okay.
Which I think I used to do stuff at like 128, and now I listen to it, and it's quite slow, relatively speaking. So I like things that are going a bit quicker.
Yeah. Kyle, again, Gorilla Museum username. Ansem just picked up an Eloquencer.
Yeah, I saw that. Well, funnily enough, the MPC seemed to sort of drop out for half a beat on when we watched him.
Okay.
Yeah. That, to be honest, I didn't care.
Jacko Grayshire has mentioned earplugs. Noise engineering, I think I've got earplugs in their modules now when you buy them direct. Little plastic tub with a couple, just those like squishy foam ones, which I don't know whether it's a bit of a joke of, we're loud and gnarly and you will need them, or whether they're genuinely going, look after your hearing. Either way is quite cool.
Yeah. I've got all sorts of different earplugs.
it's been asked a few times, what's with the new name change? Just a fresh start. Just to summarise what Phil said, because I've asked him this on camera before, and I asked him at the start of the thing as well. You could correct me if I'm wrong, but
go for it, Ben.
Taking everything you've led up to over the past few years and fresh start, kind of new approach sound-wise.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. I mean, you sometimes you live with something for as long as you can, and then you think, you know what, I just need something different, and so I did.
This is a nice one. I imagine not, because I know that you've got a pretty back-breaking amount of gear to carry around. Are you going to incorporate the Lyra, which is the Lyra 8, and the Bug brand into the live setup?
No. I mean, the Lyra 8 it would be nice. It would be nice, but I can't carry any more than I am at the moment. But the Lyra 8. Look, I'll even put this for people who aren't familiar with it. I played with this in New York at an exhibition, and oh my god, it's brilliant. It's nothing to do with modular per se, but
how
fantastic.
Having had that, how interested are you for the newly announced effects module?
There's no need for me to have that new effects module. If I didn't have that, I would buy it probably, because I'm sure, Ben, that the delay in the Lyra 8, and I assume in the FX Eurorack thing they're doing, it sounds massively like the PT delay by Bug brand.
Yeah.
And go on.
I was going to say that it's got, for the kind of analog style, we won't get into the specifics of, but part digital, part analog stuff. You've got the BBD chip that will bring in clock whine when you're pushing the time of the delay too long.
Exactly.
So this supersonic pitch will come down and you'll hear the pitch.
Yeah.
And then there will be some noise and breakup. The PT delay is just like, I'm going to crackle and spit at you for a while until I just go boom and go dead. It sounds like it's got that P delay.
I think so. When I first played with it, I was like, "Oh, this is like the PT delay." Just as you go from sort of 2 to 2 o'clock, and then further to like 5 o'clock on the delay times, it just sounds like a PT delay, a Bug brand delay, just absolutely like just going into noise, which I love. I love that about the PT delay.
And then there's the drive after it.
Yeah, which is really hard.
It sounded it on the demo I'd heard. It was like, here's some nice dual delay stuff, and then bang, just we're going to turn the mix of this drive up and it is going to hit you.
Yeah, it is really, there's nothing subtle about it.
Yeah.
I honestly, I love it. I love this Lyra, and I intend to use it a lot more. I'll probably have to, I'm going to have to sample it. But again, this is where the 301 comes back into its own. I've got this gear. I want to have these sounds, but I can't. I can't carry around all this stuff as a one-man band. It'd be different if it was a tour with a lorry and all that. Then you could say, okay, I'll have a table set aside for my Bug brand for one track. I don't mind. I'll walk over there. But when you're doing it as I am, you have to face reality.
I don't know if Kyle said, sorry, Kyle, you might have said this in the chat beforehand. I think you did, and I missed it. When are you going to 3D print your next case? Has this been mentioned before, or have I missed something?
No, it's a private conversation.
Okay.
But so this comes back to Ansem. So
okay.
he printed his own. He did a 3D case.
There's the Manis in there from Tip Top, which isn't 3D printing. I think it's injection molding for the plastic case.
Right. Yeah. No, this is 3D printing.
Okay.
If you go through his Instagram, maybe from mid last year, he's got these couple of different images. But no, I'm not going to be doing any. I'm happy with Ross's wooden approach.
Yeah, cool. Well, we'll look to kind of wrap this up. It's a massively extensive rig rundown.
Hopefully it was interesting to people.
Yeah, well, thanks for your time and knowledge and sharing of experience on all that. It's super useful. Yeah, last kind of, let's say 5 minutes for people to get chat questions in. Anyone watching not live, just on YouTube, if you ask in the comments, I try and reply to everyone, and if I can't answer you, I'll ask Phil, or Phil will come back and comment.
Sure.
I'm sure we can answer questions afterwards. Yeah, what's next, I guess? Have you got gigs coming up, EP?
I'm working on new tracks predominantly, so got 4 in the bag this year, looking for another 4 to 6 in the next 2 or 3 months. I think based upon that, I'll start then working on a brand new live set, which represents the sort of style of those new tracks. But yeah, just I mean, this is essentially, unfortunately, a hobby. So it has to be balanced with all the other things that you have to do in your personal life. But yeah, so I'm just going to work on getting some new tracks, which actually I'm already really quite pleased with. I'm also doing another project with another guy in Brighton, which is it's actually really exciting as well. I can't say too much about that at the moment, but yeah, doing something else. Well, it's not techno per se, but it's already sounding pretty good. So, yeah, just working on and just chipping away and doing what I can do with the time I've got.
Yeah. So last few questions. I'll put links. I've had SoundCloud and YouTube up. I'll put links to all this stuff and Bandcamp. Will you change your system much to move to new material, or is it you've got to this system and the new material is going to come?
Yeah, I really don't think. I don't think I'm going to change it at all now.
The way you've been fine-tuning this, I mean, for anyone that hasn't seen you on previous things with me or other shows, you've had a one-in, one-out rule. In terms of, well, this is a finite amount of space. Yeah. I've got to fit 8 HP in. Something has to come out.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
I'm not surprised you've hit a point of this isn't moving. For something.
Yeah, I mean, we're really talking about the last 3% of what I can change. I don't really know what it is I could change now. Or what it is I want to change. I'm quite comfortable with how it is now, and it comes back to this idea of it being an instrument. It's important that it is an instrument, because then you get all that sort of muscle memory and all those sorts of things when you're playing live. So you're not sort of hunting around going, "Oh, where's the level for this thing?" You just know where it is implicitly. Not implicit. As a sort of reflex.
Yeah, so it becomes a subconscious thing. It's that thing of, not to say my patching's amazing on my own system or anything, but if I come and play on your rig or you come and play on this rig, you kind of like, right, I want to use that voice or that oscillator. Where's a filter? Where's the the whole pro is so slow.
It is. It's really difficult. And I think there's a lot to be said about. I think I'm sort of paraphrasing what I think people might say about myself. But I think a lot of people probably shocked, maybe not the right word, but intrigued to the fact that I do have it as a sort of fixed system, apart from this one-in, one-out type thing that you mentioned, where the majority of people would be building patches or, putting together patches. Maybe those patches might last for a few months max, but then eventually they'll still get pulled apart and restarted, which I actually think it's invaluable in learning all the different subtleties of all the different modules and how they work together. But ultimately, I think it's also really good to build a system which then you explore. So you say, this is the system, I'm going to build it, and then this is my limitation. Now, what can I get out of it? What can't and can I do with it? And I know it sounds trite to say that limitation is an important part of creativity, but indeed it is. So I think building a system which becomes an instrument is not a bad, at least, experiment, if nothing else, for people.
Yeah, I really like that. there are other cases out of what people ever see on here for me, and they become these little systems for me. It might just be a single skiff or a little lunchbox, or it might be 9U or whatever. There's kind of stuff all over the place. The room's a tip, but they become a small system that I live with. And I feel like that's really where I do my learning in terms of kind of trying to push myself. There's a certain amount of, oh shit, I've said I'll have a video ready in a week and I have to learn this module, which, you know, would fast track the process way more than me just thinking, oh, I'll try a new modulation source in this voice and see how I get on over the coming weeks. But yeah, I think that idea of something small and at least semi-finite and staying for a while and sticking is quite crucial, really. And I like again, I understand it's a fortunate position I'm in, but I like the separation of kind of just general playground and instrument. Yeah. That's too messy for me to say it's kind of an instrument. I know it is, and you know, I'm not knocking having a lot of gear, but the way I've set that up, it just isn't. It's kind of, this is 32 HP for a video, and I need to pull that out, and I'll just randomly pull something out. And then I do what we were saying about being in someone else's system. I can be in the middle of filming a video and going, I've got an envelope to hand, and I pulled it out the night before because I've put a new sequencer in or whatever it is. It's a very different kind of thing. I think we've hit it for questions. If we haven't, leave a comment. If you're not watching live, leave a comment. Huge thanks to everyone in the live chat. I'll pull you in here for a minute. Really cool. An absolute ton of stuff. Some great little sub conversations going on amongst people, and great to see some familiar and some new faces as well. Thanks for everyone that joined us live. Again, thanks, Phil, for a huge amount of time and knowledge and experience for us. And yeah, let's call it there. And links in the description. See everyone soon. Cheers, Phil.
Cool. Thanks, everyone. Cheers. Bye-bye.